In the last section, we customized our email field by specifying the keyboard type for it so that the user could more easily select that @ symbol. We're now going to move forward onto creating our password field. The password field is also going to be a text form field, but it's going to have some slightly different options passed to it. So to get started, I'm going to expand the password field method, and from there we are going to return a text form field. Now, like I just mentioned, a lot of these options are going to be very similar for the password field. The first property we're going to add on is that decoration to make sure that we specify an appropriate label text and appropriate hint as well. So inside of the text form field, I'm going to add the named property of decoration, and I'm going to give it an input decoration. I'll give it a label text of, how about enter password? And then for hint text, we could just do something simple like password. Adding in a hint or a placeholder to a password field doesn't make a lot of sense because we can't really give our users a hint of what their password is per se, but we can at least add something in here to say like, yeah, this really is supposed to be your password. All right, so that's enough to get started with. I don't think that we need to add in a keyboard type because for a password, we don't really care about presenting that @ symbol quite so prominently. So no need to add a keyboard type on the text form field for the password field. Now to test this out, I'll scroll back up to my build method. I'll find the password field call that we had commented out, and I'm going to uncomment it like so. Then I will flip back over to my terminal. I'm going to refresh the application with Shift-R, and then I will expect to see a second input appear here on the screen. All right, so there it is. So we've now got email address and enter password. So I can select this thing and then enter in text. Now, as I'm starting to look at this, there's something a little bit awkward about it. Notice how on the first input up here, we have a label of email address, and the second one says enter password, kind of inconsistent with the terminology we're using there. So just because I'm a little bit nitpicky, I think I am going to change the label text on the password field to be simply password. Now the label text and the hint text are the same, which is also not the best thing in the world, but hey, you know what, we don't need to worry that much, I guess. This is good enough for now. All right, now the other thing that you might be curious about here is that when I try to enter in some text for the password, it's all displayed with plain text. But it'd be really nice if we instead saw like those little security dots instead, so that other people can't look over our user's shoulder and plainly see the password of our user. So I would really like to make sure that this password input right here is regarded as a password input element. To add on that customization, we're going to again look at the documentation for the text form field. So back at my documentation, I'm going to find the text form field class. You can probably guess where we're going to go. I'm going to find my constructor. So on my constructor right here, we're going to look for a named property of obscure text right here. So obscure text is a Boolean. By default, it is false. If we pass in obscure text of true instead, then that input will show dots after a user enters some text in. So on my password field right here, I'm going to enter in, outside of the input decoration, I'll enter in obscure text true, like so. So now if I save this and do a quick refresh again, I should now be able to select that password input, and then when I enter in text, the first character is displayed as plain text, and that's just a helper so that users understand what character they just pressed, but everything else inside there is represented with a single dot, which is definitely what you would expect for a password input. So this is how we turn a normal text input field into that kind of password appropriate one. Now, for the rest of this application, I am not going to use obscure text just because I want to have you see the text I'm entering in that password field. It's going to be a little bit relevant later on for you to be able to see the actual text I'm entering. So I'm going to remove this setting, but you are absolutely free to leave it on there and leave it in as true. One other thing you could do is just leave it as false, like so. Little bit Don't really have to, because like I said, obscure text defaults to be false. But if you just want to remember how you can obscure the text more easily, you could definitely leave that note in there. But again, I'm going to remove it simply because I want you, for this course, to be able to see the text that's in there. Okay, so that's good for our password field. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back in the next section and put together our submit button at the bottom of the form.